Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And on this episode, I thought I would share something that happened to me earlier this week that I found impactful to myself, and I think some of you will as well. I had a visit from a former member who had been at Light of the World for many years. And this member moved away ultimately because of some stuff that was going on with his health. In March of last year, 2022, his life changed in an instant. He was diagnosed with ALS. And if you're not familiar with ALS, it is a brutal disease. There's no hope for it. There's no cure for it. And for most people, it kills in a couple years to, if you're lucky, normally 5 years. And so after he was diagnosed with ALS, he came in to talk to me. And I remember, very clearly that day that he came in. I remember the look on his face and the seriousness and the gravity of what he had found out. And honestly, he looked scared. You could just see it in him. And, we talked about what it all meant. We talked about what his plans were, and spent some time praying with him. But, it's a death sentence. With cancer, it's not necessarily a death sentence. In fact, I feel like at least more people seem to survive cancer now than seem to die from it, or at least the initial bout with cancer. But with the ALS, there's no hope. I mean, you're going to die. It slowly attacks the nerves and the muscles in your body, and ultimately, for most people, you don't have the strength, the muscles to be able to breathe, and you either suffocate, die, or you have pneumonia that you can't clear out of your lungs, and you die. Over the next few months after we talked about it, he had to make some changes. He had to retire / quit from his job, and then begin plans of he and his wife moving up to Oklahoma, where his kids live, so that he could spend the remainder of his days near family and just get to spend the whatever time he has left with them. I got a call from his wife just probably about, maybe 6 months ago. So somewhere like several months after he was diagnosed, and it didn't look good. He was in the hospital. Now, ALS moves quick, but it doesn't move that quick. For ALS, once again, you're looking at maybe 2 to 5 years. And so less than a year, or maybe right around a year, or a little bit less, he was in the hospital, and it did not look good. They didn't know what was wrong with him, but he wasn't able to get oxygen into his body. His lungs were not functioning right. And, I tried to comfort her, saying that, hopefully the doctors will get him through this, and then his lungs will recover, and he'll kind of get back to, where he was before, and still have the 2 to 5 years to live. And she said, no, they're telling her whatever damage is done, he will never recover from that. So it didn't look good. It looked like he was going to possibly die. He did survive, but as a result, his health took a serious hit. And so where you normally would say you have 2 to 5 years to live with ALS, now his lungs, or his ability to breathe, has become seriously compromised. I hadn't heard from either he or his wife since that had taken place, but I got a call earlier this week from him, and he left a message and said he was in town. His wife had some work to do, and he had traveled with her, and he had a couple books that I'd given him when he came and gave me the news about his ALS. I gave him a book on anxiety, gave him another book from Tim Tebow to try to encourage him. And he still had the books. Honestly, I had totally forgotten that I gave him the books. So he left a message saying he had a couple books, and he would like to drop them off and come by and see me. And I let him know, called him back and said, listen, I could care less about the books, but I'm excited that, you're in town and you come on by and see me. So he came by Tuesday afternoon Today's Thursday. So a couple days ago, he came by and dropped off his books and saw me. And I was a little bit surprised to see him. He came in, and he's now in a wheelchair that you control with a little joystick up by where your hand is, and drive it. And of course, the last time I saw him, he was still walking, and he didn't show any visible signs of the disease that was beginning to overtake his body. He was wearing shorts, and honestly, his legs look normal. There's no atrophy. I asked him about that. I asked him about being in the wheelchair. I said, your legs, they seem to still have tone and so forth. And he said he could stand for a little bit of time, but his ability to walk, was gone. I thought his face looked decent. It didn't look thin or gone. Once again, his arms looked normal. There wasn't any signs of atrophy, but his breathing was very, very shallow and quick. He had mentioned that the disease was attacking him in the diaphragm, and for everyone, like the disease will affect all of your muscles, but it'll specifically focus more on some than others, and in a lot of people, and in his case, it's his diaphragm. So he doesn't have the ability to take a deep breath, and so he has to take a bunch of shallow breaths. I asked him, what's your oxygen level? And he said 95%. So that's not horrible, but he has to work really hard, to get that, to breathe, and not to mention then to try to talk on top of that. And I said, otherwise physically you look good, even though I understand you're weak and you're in the wheelchair. I said, when did all of this happen? And he said, well, when he was sick in the hospital with whatever went on, and they're not 100% sure what. They thought it might have been a reaction to the medicine that he was on. That really kind of set him back physically, where he lost his strength and he wasn't able to recover. And then he lost a lot of strength, especially in the muscles of the diaphragm. So once again, his breathing was very, don't want to say labored, but having to work extra hard to just bring in air. But what I appreciated about him the most is, like, the last time I saw him, let's just say a little over a year ago, his eyes and his face showed worry, understandably so. They showed the weight of his terminal illness and disease, and just the seriousness of it, and in essence, the weight of the world being on your shoulders when one day you wake up and you think, I got a few more years to work, and then I've got retirement, and then I'm going to be able to enjoy the hunting, the fishing, and all the things that I enjoy doing. And the last time I saw him, it was coming through his eyes, coming through his face. Just he just showed how worried and concerned he was, and that was gone this time. And I would tell you, like, there was a glow to his face. He had a smile. He had a sense of peace. He had this sense of just he rather than just oozing worry and fear and concern and the heaviness of the world, like, the exact opposite is coming through him. Now, mind you, the time before I saw him, he was physically great. Now, physically, he's not so great. And you would think, like, the heaviness of the world would be upon him, but it wasn't at all. And I was just shocked by just how much peace was just kind of radiating off of him. I've said from time to time, there's been a handful of people that in their death, they minister to me. And it's only been a handful of people, because most of us, when we're faced with our own imminent demise, there's just this heaviness. There's this dread, like, I'm not ready to go type thing. But there's a handful of people over the 25 years of being a pastor or so that they don't have that. And this gentleman, more than any of them, just like not only had the peace. I would say the 5 or so people throughout my ministry, the way they minister to me is there's just this immense peace about them, even with death being right there before them. With Mark, there was certainly the peace, but there's just this joy, this childlike glow coming from his face and his eyes. And I don't know that I've ever seen that in anyone that I've talked to that is in the relatively last stages of their life. And I asked him, like, what happened? How are you this way when the last time I saw you, like, I'm giving you books, I'm saying whatever I can, I'm doing whatever I can to at least try to set your mind at ease, not successfully, understandably so. And now, like, you're glowing, man. You're happy. You're at peace. You're content. And he talked about the fact that initially what he really had to struggle with is he thought God was punishing him for something in his life, and that's why he got this illness. And that in the year or so since I had seen him last and talked to him last, he realized this isn't punishment from God at all. That it's a sinful world, it's a broken world, and it just is what it is. And so not only does he not think that God's punishing him, he's not doing the second thing that most people do. He's not blaming God for it too. And that was really great to see. That is the most mature way, spiritually speaking, that you can look at a terminal disease, let alone one that kind of tortures you, like what ALS does. Is it slowly robs your body of the ability to move and to even breathe. And he started sharing with me how in this he's really learned to rely on God. And I said, isn't it funny that I said, in the things that we can control, when we can control things, we're not good at relying on God. And he just kind of nodded and agreed. And I'm like, and it's in those times when we have no control. That's the time where, like, if we're going to surrender, we surrender because, listen, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. And if the doctors can't help you, if you can't help yourself, if there's no one in this world that can help you, you got one or two choices. You're going to turn to God to rely on him, or you're going to just be in despair. And he talked about how he can't imagine people that don't have faith, how they go through an illness like this. And so in the hopelessness of what he's facing, he moved past thinking that God was punishing him to just simply relying on God. So much so that, like, he doesn't even take medicine for his for ALS. And I said, how long does medicine extend your life? He said, the doctor said 5 or 6 months. He said, and they told him it'd probably make him sick, and he wouldn't really enjoy whatever time he has left. So he said, I'm not even taking any medicine for it. Like, he said, he knows where he's going, and like he's looking forward to going. So why take medicine to extend his life, 5 or 6 months? And then we started talking about some other things, and I'm like, help me understand how you went from the Mark that I talked to you last time to this time. Okay, you started off thinking that God is punishing you. You moved past that. You learned to rely on God. And then he's like, have you ever heard of God winks? And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that term before. God winks are when God shows himself to you, either through the ordinary or at times the extraordinary. And they're very powerful things. And he shared with me that at some point in this process, he said, I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked at the clock and it was 3:16 in the morning. He said, the next night, I woke up and I looked at the clock and it was 3:16 in the morning again. He said, then there's the third night in a row. He woke up and it was 3:16 in the morning. And he said, you know what? Something in my mind said 3:16. He said, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. And he said, as soon as he realized that, then he's never woken up at 3:16 again. It almost reminds me of when God's talking to Samuel when he's just a kid at the temple, and God saying, Samuel, Samuel. Samuel doesn't know who's talking to him. He hadn't really even been introduced to the Lord yet. His mom dropped him off at the temple, and the high priest was raising him. And so he goes to the high priest, and he's like, did you call me? And the high priest is like, no, I didn't call you. And this happens a few times before the high priest realizes, you know what? It must be God calling you. Next time you hear that voice say, speak, Lord, your servant listens. It's one of those type moments. It's not God calling him by his voice, but God calling him by that number 3:16. And by the third time of seeing it, 3 nights in a row, he's realizing that God is reminding him that God loves him and that he's not alone in the midst of this horrible illness that he has. And the moment he realizes it, he doesn't ever wake up at that time again. A God wink. And I don't know. I think God winks more than what we realize. I think just some of us fail to see it. And to know that even in the midst of a horrible illness like that God's with you, it kind of changes your perspective on a horrible illness like this. I mean, I guess you could still be bitter at God, but Martin hasn't been. But when you know God is with you, what else matters? You know, I often talk about heaven to people, and I'm like, you know what? If my father's not there, you know, my grandfather is extremely close. If he wasn't there, I'm like, if I care that a loved one isn't in heaven, heaven isn't as good as what it's cracked up to be. Because if we're in the presence of God, what else matters? So if people are alive, by all means, like, we need to be concerned about their eternal salvation. But after they die, like, I don't care who they are. If they make heaven, and being in the presence of God doesn't make heaven, I'm sorry, heaven's not as good as it's cracked up to be. But I know heaven's as good as it's cracked up to be. And I know when I'm in the presence of God, nothing else is going to matter. Same thing as you're going through a terminal illness like this. When you feel God's presence, when you feel like God just winked at you and spoke at you like that, it really doesn't matter what else is going on in your life. It doesn't matter that you're dying from a disease, because you're in the presence of God. And you're about to fully be in the presence of God. I oftentimes like to kind of describe that like a mountain climber. When we have these God winks, when we have these encounters with God, it's like you're putting an anchor in the side of the mountain. So, you know, people that are climbing mountains, they'll anchor themselves in every so many feet. I don't know, I'm not a mountain climber, but they will. That way, if they slip, if something happens, they're not going to plummet to their death. That anchor will catch them, and then they can continue the climb. Well, that's what those God winks, do. I mean, we don't know what tomorrow will bring, and it may be a diagnosis of ALS, diagnosis of cancer. Your kid might die, your spouse might die. It might be a million different things. But when you have those anchors in there, where you know that God is present in your life, you're not going to plummet. You're not going to fall away from your faith, because in the end, you know God is with you. And if you truly understand God is with you, then what can ruin your life? What can ruin your I mean, there's a lot of things that can go bad, but if God's with you, who can be against you? If God's with you, then what else really matters? And so it was really kind of cool hearing that story of the 3:16 and how that really helped him to understand the presence of God, even in the midst of this illness, was with him. He just has extreme confidence now where he's going. I asked if his family is comfortable with it. They're not, but he is, because he's had those experiences and those encounters. And it's funny that it's in his pending death that he's truly come to life. I've known him as a member. I don't know how many years, 12, 15 years. I don't know. Been at Light of the World for 23. So everything's 15 years to me. I don't know. It's like, how far away is it? 5 miles. I don't know. How long people have been there? 15 years. Might have been more, might have been less, but he's been there quite some time. But in all that time that I've known him, he hasn't exuded joy like he is now, even in the wheelchair. He hasn't exuded just a love for God and confidence in where he's going like he is now. It took dying for him to come to life. And it reminds me of Scripture. It's like, if we die with Christ, we'll live with him. And that's where he's at. He's dying with Christ. He's dying in faith. He knows where he's going. He doesn't have any concerns. And how cool is it that, like, God can use an illness like this to draw him closer, that in these final months that he has to live, like, he's evangelizing. And I'm telling you, like, I can tell people about Jesus all day long, but when you see someone in a wheelchair that, is struggling to even breathe, but with whatever breath he has is testifying to the name of the glory of God, and it's, oozing out of his eyes, his pores, his face, and everything, you can just see this glow, this peace, this confidence. I'm telling you, that's powerful. And as I sat there and I talked to him, I wondered, you know what? I wonder how I would handle something like that. And this is where people ministered to me, because I'm like, I think they might be handling it even better than what I would. And the funny thing is I was sitting there wrestling with how would I handle it. I talked to him about, my own journey, because I thought I was going to have to handle it too, right around the time that he did. And I had already shared that with him before. A few months after Mark was diagnosed with ALS, I started having all of these random, just neurological symptoms. Probably about 4 months after, I was having some issues like swallowing, where I was choking on my saliva, because we take it for granted that we swallow fine. There's never an issue, and I started doing that like a few times a day. I would, like, all of a sudden, like, have these strange, just involuntary deep breaths coming in where I was gasping for air, and like I wasn't intending to. Like, sometimes, like, when our nose is stuffed up, we intentionally, like, take a deep breath. I wasn't doing this. Like, I could be mid-conversation and then all of a sudden just be like, and it's kind of disconcerting when your body's taking this huge breath of air when you didn't tell it to. I had developed this constant muscle twitching in my left leg, where it looks like my muscles are playing a symphony, especially in, like, my calf area. My hands, like, I go out to eat with friends and show them, like, as I take bites, all I'm doing is eating, and all of a sudden, like, my hand would seize up and into like a ball, because I'd lose muscle control and be like a giant Charlie horse in my hand. When I went fishing like a year ago, I couldn't hardly reel in the after I cast the lure, because my hand was just constantly cramping up. Charlie horses really bad in my legs. All this stuff just kind of hit me at once about 4 months after Mark had his stuff happen. And the first neurologist I saw, like, early summer last year, I remember he was kind of concerned. He was having me do certain, like, tests that neurologists have you do, like close your eyes, touch your nose. I'm not anywhere hitting my nose. I'm like eyebrow, cheekbone, like, it didn't matter how many times he did it. Like, I couldn't find my nose, and like, that wasn't real cool. There's a few other tests he had me do in the office that I struggled with, and he seemed a little bit concerned. He ordered all kinds of tests, an MRI of the brain, a brain study where they hook you up to all these gadgets for like 3 days that monitor all your brain waves. There was a muscle conductivity test where they're testing your muscles and your nerves by sticking these needles in you and then zapping you to see, like, does the electricity flow, through your nerves and muscles the way that they should. They stick a needle in and listen to your muscles. He ordered like at least 20 different blood tests. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, this isn't going to turn out well. I remember thinking, what are the chances? ALS is a relatively rare disease. There's only 2 people I've known in my life that have had it. What's the chances that in a medium-sized church like, Light of the World, that 2 of us would be getting it within 4 months of each other is kind of the thoughts that were going through my head after I left that neurologist appointment. And then the funny thing was I went from that, and it was Friday, and I went grocery shopping. And as I'm going through the grocery store, I'm sitting there literally thinking, all right, if this turns out to be what it is, then I need to decide at what point I go out on disability. Do I stay and continue to pastor, as long as I can? Or do I realize that I've got very limited time left and step aside so someone else can come in and enjoy whatever time I have left, spending it with, the people that I want to spend it with. And like, this is going on in my mind the entire time that I'm grocery shopping. And then I go to check out at the grocery store, and I try to go through the main line. And nowadays they only have one line open at the grocery store anyways, because they can't ever hire enough employees. And there's a few people in it, and I wasn't going to sit through it. And then I went and looked at the one area of the self-checkout, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not even going to go through that because there's way too many people that are in that line. And so then I went to the far end of the store where I've never checked out before, and I decided that I'm going to kind of check out over there. And the craziest thing is, as I'm checking out at the grocery store, there's these 2 kids talking. I say 2 kids, like I think high schooler. Maybe it was during the summer, so probably high schoolers. They weren't in school, and they were working their part-time job at the grocery store. And as I'm checking out, I hear the one say to the other, yeah, I've started going to this new church. It's not like any other church, and I've heard a lot about it. They're not all about money like these other churches, and my parents want to start going there. It's called Light of the World. Now, I can tell you, like, 25 years of being a pastor, I've dreamt about, like, being, like, famous or something that people talk about, me or the church at a grocery store where I'm checking out. But, like, the guy literally mentions the pastor, and he starts telling the kid about my sermon that I had the week before. And then, he's mentioning the church. And I have no idea who these people are. And you want to talk about a God wink? That's a God wink. And I'm chuckling to myself. I'm like, all right, I just literally spent the last hour of grocery shopping contemplating my going out on disability. And here God just randomly, and it wasn't random, puts these 2 kids talking that I don't know, that are recounting my message almost word for word to each other from the week before, and talking about Light of the World. Coincidence? I knew it wasn't. And as it turns out, the original neurologist I saw, they ended up having a contract dispute with Blue Cross Blue Shield. In the middle of all these tests that I was having done, I had to find a new neurologist. That one did the muscle and nerve conductivity test. Came back normal, other than in, I think, both legs there's a nerve he couldn't find, so that was abnormal, but that's not necessarily a big deal. All the ones that they could find, all the rest were working just fine. And discussed all my symptoms, and he said, I think you have BFS. I'm like, okay, what's that? He said that's benign, like, fasciitis syndrome or something like that. And what it is you have almost all of the ALS symptoms, but unlike ALS, you don't have any muscle or nerve degeneration or loss. So here we are over a year removed from that. I had that nerve and muscle test repeated after about a year, and everything else it's stable. A lot of the symptoms, a couple of them have improved, but honestly, like my left leg still twitches 24/7, and a lot of the Charlie horses and stuff like that has subsided. So some of the symptoms have subsided, but some of them still continue to this day. But the muscles and the nerves aren't weakening, and they're staying the same. And you know what? Everything's going to be fine. Which, as I sat there talking to Mark, and to know that like he had all these symptoms and it was something that will ultimately take his life, and I had many of the same symptoms, and mine will not affect my quality of life at all. The only thing that I can think of is, except by the grace of God go I. We take things for granted. But you know what? Our lives can be upended tomorrow. And except by the grace of God go I. And I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase, but it basically means like terrible things happen all the time. But it's only by the grace of God that it's not happening to you and to me. But you know what? There is going to be a day that it's going to go I. There's going to be a day where you're going to get news and I'm going to get news, and that news isn't going to be good. I mean, unless you die like in the middle of the night of a heart attack, or a sudden heart attack drops you, or you die in a car crash. I mean, otherwise, there's a million other ways in which, we're going to know it as we're deteriorating and slowly die. And the question is how are we going to handle those moments? Are you going to handle it where you're angry with God? Are you going to handle it in self-pity? Are you going to handle it like you think God's somehow punishing you for things that you've done wrong? Or I hope we can handle it like how Mark is handling it, and the handful of other people that I've known throughout my 25 years of ministry, in which even in the midst of facing death, that, you know what, we're just looking forward to seeing Jesus. And we're going to tell as many people about Jesus along the way. In the book of Psalms, David says, even though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. I'm here to tell you, like, God's presence is a comfort. It's not only a comfort when things are going great, but when the doctors can't help you anymore, when there's nothing on this earth that can bring you comfort and give you hope, guess what? God can, and He will, if you'll turn to Him and let Him. And so I hope and pray that whenever you get to that point and I get to that point, that's the faith that we can live with, because it is a very powerful faith. And I just hope and pray in whatever days Mark has left that so many people will be touched by his confidence and his peace and his certainty that he knows where he's going, and he doesn't blame God for that at all. How could you? Why would you? Because he's going to a much better place, and he knows it, and you can tell he knows it. And I'm here to tell you that's powerful. Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. I hope all of you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.